Hello, welcome to Recapping with Delora
and Ashley.
Please follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Recapping Podcast.
Also, comment, rate, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. We're on all the things.
We would love to hear your ratings of the movies and shows we review.
Email us your audio file to recappingpodcast@gmail.com and we will play it during the show.
Or DM us on Instagram and we will post and read it on air.
Thank you guys so much for listening.
Thank you.
Delora, we back, girl. What's going on?
Hey, Ashley. I am doing wonderful. How about yourself?
Good. You know, it's the week of Essence Fest.
Can you pinch me? I cannot believe this.
I am so excited. Not only is this my first time going to Essence Fest, it's my first time going to New Orleans, to NOLA. So I'm excited to get some of this food. I'm excited to see all these beautiful Black people and to have some unforgettable experiences with you, girl.
Absolutely, Ashley. Cafe du Monde, we are on our way.
Well, speaking of Blackity Black, we have to recap a Black show. Atlanta, season 3, Delora. This is an FX and Hulu show. And again, shout out to Brandon. Thank you for this request for this recap. We got you, bro.
He's gonna get a kick out of this. I love it.
We got you. All right. So, quick summary, guys. Ern and his cousin Alfred, based in Atlanta, try to make their way in the world through the rap scene. Along the way, they come face to face with social and economic issues touching on race, relationships, poverty, status, and parenthood. Season 3 is interesting because we have quite a few standalone episodes, but in terms of cast, I'll just name our core series regulars, which is Donald Glover as Ern, Brian Tyree Henry as Alfred, aka Paperboy, Lakeith Stanfield as Darius, and Zazie Beetz as Vanessa, aka Van. Delora, reviews for season 3 for Rotten Tomatoes, 97% critic score, 68% audience score, and overall for the series, it has 92% from Google users. What is your grade for Atlanta season 3?
All right, Atlanta season 3. I like to say that each episode with its own little surprise. There were moments where I was like, what in the Jordan Peele is going on here? There were definitely more like scary parts than previous seasons also. But overall, dark humor, Twilight Zone vibes, and hilarious cameos. I'll say it's a season full of Teddy Perkins, okay? I give this season a B+. How about you?
Definitely a ride this season. I know when it first started, we said we did not know what to expect, and every episode really ran with that theme. Didn't know who was writing the episode, didn't know what we were in for, didn't know who the cast was necessarily going to be, because it was almost half of the episodes of the season were not with the core cast. So I mean, that was a decision, honey. And even though there were elements that were weaved between all the episodes, you really did get an experience every single week. So I really, really enjoyed the season when it first started because the first 2 episodes were wild, and I know we microdosed them, and there were still, I say the bulk of it I enjoyed, but there was a little bit of, lull between some episodes for me too. Probably particularly the drug trip through Amsterdam was probably my least favorite episode of the season.
I'm like, what is going on?
Yeah, exactly. So overall, it gets a B because I did enjoy it, and I will watch season 4. I'm excited to see how they wrap up the series, but it's a B. All right, guys, let's get into this season. We had already discussed episodes 1 and 2 previously, as I mentioned in a micro dose, but let's go back to the very beginning. We start the season off with episode 1, 3 slaps. And I want to call out the writers because I know it was written by different folks. And the writer for season 3, episode 1 was Stephen Glover. And it starts with a scene on Lake Lanier. Delora, had you heard about the folklore surrounding the lake before you watched this episode?
No, but I have heard about Black towns being underwater.
Mm-hmm.
Amber Ruffin has a wonderful explanation or history of it that I highly recommend people check out to get more information about it. But yeah, fascinating.
I know I had heard of Lake Lanier, but it was one of those things that was like in passing. It didn't stick in my mind. And I also didn't know that this was necessarily what this episode was starting off with until I was seeing people live tweeting about it. Because I told you I watched this episode when it was actually airing, which is rare for me these days. I usually watch stuff next day or on Hulu, whatever.
Yeah.
So I was getting all of the information. I'm like, this is creepy. And not only is this creepy, I was wondering my second watch, how long had this Black man known this white man? Because everything he was saying and the way he was maneuvering, I was like, he would be creeping me the fuck out. I'd be like, I'm gonna need to take this boat back to shore. I don't know what's happening, but I'm a Black person. I don't play these games.
Not at all.
As soon as I start feeling uncomfortable, something has got to change.
Especially in the South. I mean, I'm not gonna lie.
Girl, I had that little tingle running up the back of my neck. I said, how is this your friend? Like, how well do we know him? If I have to hop out this boat, I don't know what's happening. But one thing that he said that really struck me again on this second watch was he said, with enough blood and money, anyone can be white. What do you think about that, Delora?
I don't know, man, because it was a lot of Black white commentary throughout this entire season.
Yeah.
And when it comes to Donald Glover, I know his brother wrote this episode, but you know, it is his show. He's annoyed me when it comes to talking about Blackness and things like that in the past. And I'm talking about his early stuff, especially about his dating preferences and things like that. So it's like,
which is why Atlanta has always surprised me.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm like, are these just the things you don't say?
Or are you saying it because everyone else is saying it, so you want to be part of the conversation? Like, I don't know sometimes.
Or is it because of the collaboration with other Black folks who are in the writers' rooms?
And then sometimes it's like, are you making fun of what Black people have to say about things like this? Because it kind of manifests itself later throughout the season.
There's one particular thing, yes, that I definitely wondered if it was a mockery.
Yeah.
So to your point, that could be very true. I try to take his intentions purely because if I don't, I would stop watching the show.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah. But it's like, it's just very interesting. Like I said, it's like this dark humor and social commentary and things like that. That did we have this in season 1? Like, I really don't remember.
I can't remember. It's been so long ago.
A very long time. And granted, I appreciate levels of evolution because again, season 2 was a lot of fun. But you know, I don't know.
But going back and watching the Juneteenth episode that I mentioned during our headlines and hot topics, I did see seeds of what we will see with Van this season, which I had not been expecting.
Really?
So I'll talk about that a little bit once we get to our discussion of Van and her journey through season 3.
What the fuck?
Exactly. That should have been how they ended the show. That should have been what came up. All right. In the meat of the episode, Laquarius, a Black kid, is taken from his home by CPS after an incident at school and placed with white moms who already have multiple Black children living with them, have a stinky house, bad hygiene, feed them raw chicken, and seemingly killed a Black CPS worker doing a welfare check. By the end of the episode, these white moms try to murder the children and themselves. This is based on the real life Hart family and the tragedy that befell those children. And they did so by driving off a cliff. But Laquarius and the other kids managed to escape in time. I know we talked about this. This episode was no less devastating watching it the second time. Again, them trying to save that fucking dog. But you know what I thought about this second watch, especially because of the fact that Laquarius goes home afterwards and his mom's reaction was, oh, so you finally decided to come back. What do you think stopped Laquarius from leaving sooner and going home?
Girl, that's an excellent question. Because again, with the season, they obviously are tap dancing on deeper commentary when it comes to race and living in America, or Black people living in America. And, the only thing that I could come up with is this: the idea that people who live outside our house, or even in this case, white people, have it better or do things, you know, in a way that you think is better than your current situation. And that's not always the case. So like grass is greener on the other side, when that's not, necessarily true. I don't know if I don't know, but this is me taking a guess, because that's a great question. I wasn't able to come up with that answer while watching it then.
Yeah. Because to the mom's point, like when one of the moms was like, I'm sure the situation you have here is better than wherever you came from. I was like, nah, actually it's not. His mother
Yes.
actually fed him edible food. Yes, granted, he did not have the best situation in terms of, kind of the way it was perceived. His mother was very hard on him.
Yes.
But he obviously still came from a household in which he was taken care of. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. So it's the
that
gaslighting for me, with like, oh, your people's food is unhealthy. Bitch, this is raw chicken.
You put it in the microwave for 8.5 minutes and fed it to these children. I was honestly also my second watch wondering how any of the other 3 Black children were still alive, given this circumstance. Like, how long have they lived in that house with them and had to deal with this and live?
And they all knew in their souls that it was wrong.
Girl, they was out here being treated like slaves.
Yes.
Giving them free labor for them to take to the farmer's market, and then having them shake their asses and wear signs to try to attract customers. It was so deeply disturbing, beyond the suicide, which again, if they had not ended it with them escaping, I may not have made it through watching any more of this season. It would have been too hard and too devastating for that to really be what happened the way that it happened in real life. But it was a hell of a bang to get us going, right?
Well, yeah. And it almost makes me want to ask, why? Why pull this particular story out of the headlines and put it in this comedy? Because this is supposed to be a comedy of a show. And obviously they're looking for deeper meaning. And I'm just like, I'm a deep person, but I guess again, to our point earlier, it's like, what's the intention of all this? What are we doing? Where are we going with this?
I guess given the fact that none of the core cast of this episode, and we don't get anyone that we know until Earn wakes up at the end of the episode as if it was all a dream,
right?
That perhaps it's supposed to just be an opportunity for them to remind us or put it back into the social consciousness of what happened to these Black kids and what can happen and what is happening and what has happened just by being a Black person in America, and how vulnerable obviously these Black children were to what happened in this situation. Even the moms, this second time I watched it again, the one mom talking about when we adopted the first kid and everybody was praising us and stuff, and I just kept thinking, why isn't anybody stopping us? That was so deeply disturbing to me this second time.
Yeah, I ultimately put that the couple was scammers.
Well, they obviously had gotten in over their heads with whatever their initial intentions had been, because it seemed like it was very monetarily driven with whatever circumstances they now found
but
themselves
all these
in.
Dreams and plans they had in that raggedy house that never came to fruition. You know what I mean? I'm just like,
but then for y'all to think you have the right to take the lives of these Black children, but want to release your dog into the wild to live. Anyway, I've talked about this in our microdose. Y'all can go back and listen, because I felt very passionately about this my first time through, and still do. But let's move on. As I said, Earn wakes up at the end of the episode, and we move into episode 2. Santa Claus is coming to town. This episode was written by Janine Nevers. We're back with our main cast. We have Alfred, Earn, Darius, and Van, who arrives late and is doing some soul searching, all in Europe. Paperboy has become quite successful and is on tour but found himself in an absurdly nice jail in Amsterdam. He can now just get 20K on demand, which is definitely a position that we've never seen any of them in before. And Ern seems like he's really found his rhythm despite his whatever sickness he's going through, which I still think was supposed to be COVID, as manager, as we see them kind of navigating this European tour. Darius and Van go on an adventure from an address found in a used coat and witness the assisted suicide of potentially Tupac. Meanwhile, Alfred refuses to perform at a sold-out show due to insane blackface that has taken over the city due to the celebration of Santa Claus. 2 questions that I have for you from this episode, Delora. First, if you were Alfred, would you have still performed?
No. I mean, that's the beauty of working for yourself. I do understand the importance of, being impeccable with your words. However, that was a hostile environment for him and he didn't feel comfortable.
It was definitely hostile. The fact that they made it seem like it was so normal too was even more disturbing to me. Like,
which was the joke, obviously, right?
This era and year that we're living in, y'all don't want to call out this blatant racism. It's crazy. Second question I have is, would you have taken that random adventure that Darius and Van went on and gone to a stranger's home just to see what was going to happen?
I put in my notes, when trying to be free and go with fate goes wrong, because I have to admit, I laughed so hard at this part of the show because I was like, this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen in my life. Again, people scamming. I think that's the theme I got going for the season. Oh, we're going to have this peaceful moment, this celebration, this ceremony, and this dude is screaming bloody murder? Like, no. So I couldn't do it. I think I would have been up for it to a point. I don't think I would have been able to release the suffocation device.
The episode was so wild because I really did feel so peaceful and tranquil leading up to it. And then my thoughts again were, did this man sign up for this form of death?
I think so. I highly
doubt
it.
No, he was going to be smothered with plastic like that. I laughed, and I know that's very dark and very sick.
Very dark, but it was a reaction because it was like, are we serious right now? What am I watching?
But the whole point for me was, this is why stranger danger. This is why y'all would not catch me following some random white people into a van and then into a house.
They look like they were part of a cult too, right?
All white.
Yes.
And we're not even in America. I don't even know what's going on.
Yeah.
I would have had to be on some form of a hallucinogen or some type of hardcore drug to have ever had this instinct to go this direction.
The horror on Darius and
especially because Van had gone over there to try to console the man and all this and that.
Oh my gosh. I'm glad we didn't see a face. That's all I gotta say to that.
Absolutely. But again, them playing Hail Mary immediately after this man's demise told us everything we needed to know. Anyway, again, to my point about Ern earlier, I realized he has the temperament needed for this job. Like, he really could let so much like roll off his back, even the fact that he almost got his ass beat when Al backed out of that performance, because that promoter or whoever he was
stressed.
He was psyched. He lost it. Let's move on to episode 3, The Old Man and the Tree. This one was written by Tawfiq Khalid. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Party at Fernando's. Ern took the crew to a party at an elusive billionaire's house. Not gonna lie, that decoy house was quite brilliant.
I asked Dave, I was like, would you have kept going? I don't know. I'm not gonna lie. I don't know if it's because I'm a woman or what, but I'm like, unless I was with people, I'm like, all right, we'll go to the top of the stairs, but I ain't making no promises.
yet again putting themselves in a situation I'm not sure I would have gotten put in. Because first of all, do you not have his number? Call that man, call him out here, have Will take us through the house. Like, I'm not about to go into this house with, first of all, this super rude lady opening the door, acting like we're intruding on her space. It looked like a crack house. Like, I don't live in this country. I'm not doing all that. But for the sake of the show,
I'm not about to end up being somebody's,
girl,
captive. No, thank you.
We've seen a lot of films and TV shows, and not trying to be caught up in any underground sex rings. But anyway, a few things were going on in this episode. Alfred gets taken for money playing poker with Fernando. Darius makes a new friend, kind of, in socks. And Van is stealing and assaulting strangers. And by the end of the episode, leaves by herself. I don't quite know where to begin with this episode, but I guess let's start with white outrage. What did you think of the white mob that went after the Asian woman who Darius met that assumed he was hitting on her because, according to her, Black men love Asian women?
That whole thing was kind of funny to me because Darius is like, yeah, it was messed up, but on the scale of 1 to 10,
he was like, this was light work. This was light
work. We've been conditioned our entire lives, whereas this is something new and frankly in style to an extent, because there's also a great resistance that comes whenever there's an acceptance of Black people, but that's a whole nother conversation. I find it to be part of the learning curve. Ashley, what about you?
I thought it was so absurd because we should have known then how much of a problem socks was going to be. He completely fabricated so much of that story about what supposedly happened to Darius. And then the idea of how bothered, how deep they felt about this situation that did not happen to them, did not impact them, they have no awareness of or no idea of, was completely absurd. And obviously spoke so much to a co-opting of the struggle, right? And then another thing, and I remember talking to my brother about this after I watched this episode, I wonder if I was Asian, how triggering this would have been giving Asian hate crimes.
That's a great point.
Not sure they should have gone in this direction, given that fact.
But it also shows that there's definitely racism between quote unquote minority groups as well, right?
Absolutely. And I just don't know if y'all should have went the Asian route.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
Great observation.
Why do you think Fernando doesn't make good on his bets?
There's this lie that, speaking of being conditioned, because we live in a capitalist society, we like to make assumptions that people with money, there's a correlation of good, integrity, kindness, or just someone, obviously they have power, right? But we have such high expectations with people who have a lot of money and so much respect that we give people who have billions of dollars, that when you realize that they are human, just like you, and are flawed, it's somehow shocking. I also will say this. He had to learn how to get $1 billion somewhere.
I think ding, 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 you really caught me with the power aspect, because my thought was he doesn't make it on his best because he doesn't have to. No one's going to hold him accountable. Obviously, everybody else at the table knew the game. That's why they all got their asses up and left, including the lady running the poker table.
Well, that's why it sucks being the new person too, though, right?
Because you don't know you about to get caught.
It's like you'd be better off losing. And he's so busy being new money, being, I got 40. Because the guy was trying to play him like, oh, it's 20K. You know what I mean?
He did lose. There was no winning. That was the problem. There was absolutely no, even TJ, the Black kid who himself is there hustling, knew that Fernando was not coming back downstairs. Fernando even let his beloved tree get butchered before he was willing to come back downstairs and make good on that bet. That was insane. Speaking of TJ, my last question for this episode, if you were Earn and you were given an opportunity to join forces with him to hustle your friend out of money, which in TJ's case, he was trying to hustle with a whack art installation idea that he knew was whack.
That picture was funny.
Would you have joined him?
The old man in the Supreme shirt with no draws, and the way they stared at it was hilarious. I'm not gonna lie, because it was so bad. It was so bad, Ashley. Would I have joined? Am I a Stark or a Targaryen? Or what was his name? The Sparrow? I was gonna call him the Mockingjay, but obviously that's another sci-fi. We were talking about Jon Snow and GOT last week in our quick headlines and hot topics, so that's why it's coming up. If it were me, no, I would not scheme. But do I understand Earn's motivation? Yeah, I do. I get it. I don't know if I would have been able to do it. I like to go to sleep at night in peace. So if this man wasn't my friend, maybe I might consider. But being quote unquote friends with somebody, I would not willingly F my friend over. No.
Yeah. See, that would have been the conundrum for me, given that this is supposedly somebody you're friends with, cool with, whatever. Is it right to do that, knowing that he was in a vulnerable situation, is being hustled just for kind of the reparations of the situation? So, I don't think I could have necessarily done it either, but I didn't fault Earn for, he's like, well, I guess if this kid's gonna be taking your money anyway, I might as well join and get a cut. So
it's again, I need to work on my poker face, but he was like, yeah, in America it's 30%, but you're my friend. 25.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah.
It's business. It's not personal. It's business. All right, episode 4. The big payback. This one we microdosed as well. Just spoke about reparations. This takes it to a whole nother level. Reparations by way of Black people suing white descendants of their ancestors, slave owners. We follow Marshall, a white man who finds himself being followed and sued by a Black woman, saying he owes her $3 million. Dismantles his life. His estranged wife wants a divorce. He loses his home and job. And by the end of the episode, Marshall is working as a waiter at a restaurant and his wages are being garnished to pay his debt. I hadn't realized the first time I watched how completely dismissive Marshall had been of concerns about reparations until that shit hit home.
That's like every American.
Exactly. He was so, I thought of COVID. That was the thing I thought of. We were like, it's over in China. Oh, that's over in Italy. Oh, that's not going to touch us. Yada, yada, yada. So that death toll started ticking up, right?
But when we lie to ourselves and say, oh, it's not real, or it'll disappear one day.
Well, there's still people to this day who claim that it's not real. So when the white guy from the first scene in episode 1 returns in this episode to impart some knowledge and wisdom, did you feel like his message of lifting the curse of slavery and freedom would have been lost given his immediate suicide thereafter?
In some ways, I feel like it shows how real it was, right? Because it's like, who's going to want to face that? Mm-hmm. How do you make up stealing people from their homeland, destroying any ties to their culture, and then essentially throwing them to the darkest corners of your society and, literally through government programs for centuries, keep them from being your neighbor or working alongside you or whatever. You know what I mean?
We're still terrorized to this day.
Girl, it's like my mom told me this. It's like, we haven't been out of slavery as long as our people have been in slavery. How about that? In terms of the time within this country? Mm-hmm. We've made immense progress if you were to look at the timeline in that way. But yeah, I just laughed out loud because, like I said in that recap originally, it's like they would rather burn this sugar honey iced tea to the ground than really take a hard look and see all the impacts,
My thoughts
horrendous chattel slavery has been in this country.
My thoughts stand as well that this would absolutely incite a race war, and it would be chaos in the streets if something like this were to start transpiring. Because well, first of all, there's the hate factor, the fact that we've been hated for absolutely no reason forever, and treated and made to feel as if we're less than human. There's that aspect, but there's also the Marshalls of the world who are like, this isn't my problem. This wasn't me. Why do I have to pay for something that I did not do?
The lack of accountability.
The total and complete lack of accountability. He was fine with the Tesla guy, the rich guy, getting sued, but he just considered himself everyday Joe Blow, and racism and slavery had nothing to do with him. He thought his family was once slaves back in the BC era. What year were we talking about?
There was something that was going around on social media during Juneteenth that talked about slaves, and it was like, I think like 1868 or something like that. Like, we still have remnants of it. You know what I mean? My grandmother's grandmother was a slave. Like, you know what I mean? Is we're not that far removed.
We're not even remotely that far removed. We're not even remotely that far removed. Some Black celebrities were doing the post from an auction and showing what
that's what I was
the language was. Yeah.
Yep.
So,
yep.
I mean, yeah, absolutely. It was another one that was a standalone without the core cast. So I felt like at this point, I was like, well, maybe the ones that are the standalones are really supposed to be projecting messages and really supposed to be trying to invoke conversations. And this one was no different. So episode 5, Cancer Attack. This one was written by Jamal Alori. Al's phone goes missing backstage. The cast spends almost the entire episode frustratingly interrogating Wiley, a super fan and relative of the manager of the venue. And it turns out Socks, who was over the top throughout the episode, was the thief and chucks the phone in the trash. I'm still now watching it a second time confused as to what this man's motivation was, why they kept him around after Fernando's house. It's like he just leached onto the crew and they just accepted him. We don't really do that. What do you think was going on?
It was giving me Darius vibes. Like, Darius, I felt like in some ways connected to him, because I feel like there's a similarity in personalities in some ways.
Were they? Because they seem polar opposites to me. Socks was an outrage, over the top, angry person, whereas Darius is so chill and relaxed and doesn't start things.
I found Socks to be extremely random, and I get that from Darius, so that's where I'm kind of
the fact that he wanted to use a map of the building and go down secret corridors. yeah
But I was unable to gather motivation. This is an extreme example, but the one that comes to mind would be Selena and the president of her fan club, and how it's like, how can you be so in love or admire this artist or what have you, but then want to destroy them in the process? Like, I don't understand that line of thinking. It was effed up.
Because it's like, who is Socks? We don't even get a resolution because we don't see him again after this episode. So I don't know if it's going to come up again in season 4 to kind of tie him back in and tie in whatever his motivation was. But then I was also wondering, how did Wiley, for one, know Paperboy's number, and for 2, no lyrics on his phone? Because that was the thing that was making him seem guilty. I guess it's supposed to say he had looked at the phone prior to Socks taking it or something.
Or Paperboy could have did an interview and like, yeah, man, I keep my lyrics on my phone. I don't know. Lyrics on the phone is not necessarily a far-fetched idea, but yeah, the number part was kind of like interesting for sure.
Please back your stuff up to the cloud next time. Moral of that story. This was a throwaway episode to me. Again, I talked about how a couple of these in here felt like throwaway episodes to me. I was like, yeah, this doesn't really move the needle in any way. Again, maybe the whole socks thing is going to be a bigger storyline in season 4, but it didn't feel like it was necessary for them to have this episode, really. So let's move on to episode 6, White Fashion. This was written by Ibra Aki. Al's being used to help rehab the image of a fashion label that has clearly gotten into trouble for some kind of racism and created a diversity advisory board. How true to life is this for multiple scenarios we've seen within the last few years? H&M,
The House of Gucci.
Gucci, girl. Khalil, a Black activist who clearly knows the game, had to school Al when his ideas weren't implemented as he hoped. And he basically told him, you have to start your own nonprofit so that you can control the money. Delora, do you believe racism will be done by 2024?
Oh my God. It's nice to put a deadline on racism, Ashley.
Is it?
It would be nice, but we live in a world where we have young men who are radicalized and do awful things in the name of racism. So I feel like it's part of human nature, unfortunately. If you were to look at all of world history, but you know, to the extent of where we are here in America, I don't know. It should be interesting. Thank God for Jesus. I don't know.
I said, is it? Not because obviously I wouldn't want there to be an end to racism, but I just thought that line was so interesting because obviously it was just to appease the white people in the audience who wanted to believe that there was some end in sight to the issues that they are culpable for in this situation. Do you think you could play this game though? Do you think you could be Khalil and play this game in order to ultimately get the things that you want and you need for the community?
That's an excellent question. Again, the goal is to sleep peacefully at night. That's to do my best and not at the expense of my people. I think it was interesting because in the comedy of it all, they absolutely were drawing from individuals that are famous in the movement. The gentleman who was the D. Ray McKesson light character was actually quite funny as well.
Rachel Dolezal, I felt like, was a member as well.
That one guy who was seemingly racially ambiguous when he said the N-word. Paperboy was like, that doesn't feel right? Like,
yeah, he was like, I'm Black and I'm this and that. He said, are you?
Which is also a conversation that happens in the season, like, you know, Black and white and levels of Blackness, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Even though to some degree, I think we all play the game because we're set up in society to have to play the game in order to survive and thrive and get what we need. Do I think I could do it to this level where in their faces I'm kind of a puppet, but behind the scenes I'm able to do certain things? I don't think so, just because I have a very hard time swallowing my feelings about things, and like to sit in these rooms and to deal with this level of blatant, not just even racism, just ignorance to my face on a regular basis. I think I would be a very angry person if I had to deal with this all the time. So I just don't think I have the temperament for it, even if I wanted to.
Like you're essentially spinning wheels, right? Because there's no real progress. It's just pacifying the issue.
Yeah, I mean, even if, let's say, to his point, he was able to get $100,000 to do what he wanted to do with it for his nonprofit and really impact and benefit the community, the things that he's had to do and the show of support he's had to do and the press he's had to do to align himself to create that opportunity. Again, I just don't think I'm that person, because I definitely would have cussed somebody out by then. I definitely would have been Paperboy coming in that room, bitch, like And I'm not saying I would be as extreme as him. I'm just saying I know that I would have a hard time swallowing my tongue in every single scenario I would encounter when it's that blatant.
Yeah, Ern would have been able to do it though.
Ern absolutely would have been able to do it. Absolutely. So Van reemerges in this episode after being gone for weeks. Ern runs into her in a hotel lobby and has to get her out of another theft situation with a quote unquote Karen trying to make a citizen's arrest of Caucasity. Safe to say at this point that Van's definitely not all right. Ern is concerned about her, but she distracts him with the power of the pussy. Would you have felt guilty? Would you have felt any level of, not even guilty, I don't want to say that. Would you have felt some type of way if you were Ern at this point about Van? Do you feel like he should have tried harder to kind of intercede in kind of this journey that we're seeing her go on, where again she was assaulting people, pushing them in the pool at the party, now she's disappeared, she's stealing, she's doing all this stuff. Like, Van is not okay, and as her ex-partner and the mother of his child, do you think you would have tried to sit her down and have a conversation?
I think it's a delicate balance, right? I understand his concern. And yes, she is the mother of his child. So I do feel like he should say something. However, because they were once partners and they are no longer partners, that's where the sticky situation lies. You know what I mean? Because it's like, who are you to talk to me about my life? We are no longer together is no longer your concern.
So this is the point where I want to mention, when I rewatched the Juneteenth episode, that was an episode where Van took Ern to a party by a very wealthy Black woman who was married to this white man who thought he was so woke, knew so much about Black culture, yes, all of that ridiculousness. And Van was putting on, she was kind of pretending. They were pretending they were married. They were doing all of this stuff to try to get in the good graces of this Black woman.
I remember this episode, yeah.
And it was the first time that I think I remember seeing Van kind of have that switch where she's kind of able to play a part or do something that was not necessarily in her character to get what she wanted or to fulfill something she felt like she needed. And even the episode when Ern is kind of talking to her about it, she's like, I mean, you like to pretend X, Y. We both know you like to pretend. So speaking of like relationship drama and trauma, that was the first sign that I was like, well, I guess this is starting to sow the seeds of what we're going to see with her trajectory. And the fact that she, for one, did not always feel like she knew who she was or what she wanted. And then for two, could play a part.
Interesting.
And I didn't remember that before I rewatched that episode. So my last question for this episode, would you have felt any guilt if you were Darius over the gentrification of a beloved Nigerian restaurant by the white woman he brought to it, who bought the place from the landlord and turned it into a damn food truck?
Yes, to an extent, because you cannot help Columbusing, you know what I mean?
Woo! Woo, yes.
But I would feel some level of guilt because she had no idea what jollof rice was.
Her dismissiveness of the previous owner and saying, oh, I don't know actually what happened to her, we never exchanged info, as if she has no responsibility or culpability in possibly what happened to this woman and her livelihood, spoke volumes.
Absolutely.
I felt like I needed to really grab a message from this, which is be careful of the company you keep and where you take them.
Interesting. Because they can't go everywhere.
Because he had no idea that the woman who was trying to help him get lunch at this fashion label would have been such a shark and such a culture vulture. None of us knew.
No, it was definitely a surprise for sure.
Devastating. But her food probably was trash. So that's the silver lining. Episode 7, Trini to the Bone. This episode was hilarious. Focuses on an affluent white couple in New York City whose son has been raised, basically, by a Black woman from Trinidad and Tobago, Sylvia. She was his nanny, and she unexpectedly passes away. Sebastian, the son, thinks his parents' food is bland. He fits right in at the funeral that he asked to be taken to. He's only in kindergarten, by the way. And the shit went so sideways because a fight broke out. One lady tried getting into the casket, and one of Sylvia's daughters hops up and starts spouting off, taking real issue with her mom not being there for him because she's busy out here raising these white kids. What did you think about that point in particular, Delora, the grievance that Sylvia's daughter had with her?
Yeah, I wanted to talk about Chet Icon, to quote Z-Way. I just think it's interesting because that's a generational issue. The idea, especially recent immigrants in New York City, you hear a lot about, Jamaican nannies, or, she's Trinidadian nannies and things like that. That is very common. And when I say it's generational, like, again, because we're Black, we talk about slavery and its impact. That has happened for a very long time. The prioritization of, unfortunately, not your children.
And yet they still didn't feel like we were clean enough to swim in their swimming pools, drink at their water fountains.
You can be a wet nurse,
but you can raise
baby.
Girl, you can be my child's surrogate mother, do all the things, but you're not good enough to eat at my table, use my bathroom. It's a mental illness. It's just sick.
It's really gross, really gross.
I felt angry a little bit about Sylvia's daughter because I understand you're grieving, you're sad, you didn't feel like you got the time and attention of your mother, but your mom did what she had to do to survive and feed you.
Yeah. I mean, again, generational, a lot of Black mothers worked a lot, multiple jobs in some cases, and didn't have that quality time with their children, whether they were nannies, nurses, seamstress, what have you, just through the years, you know what I mean?
Absolutely. At your big age, the big age that Sylvia's daughter was, though, you're now an adult. You know about adult things. You know about adult struggles. You know that there are bills to be paid. Your mother had 3 children. She had to do what she had to do to survive and provide for you. So I was not angry. I was irritated, I guess. I felt irritated.
I thought it was inappropriate, but again, I think they were trying to play up what it's like to go to a Black funeral.
And about that, let me set the record straight for any white viewers and white listeners. That is not the norm at every Black funeral.
Yeah, no, not the fighting, but definitely crying over the casket. That's happened.
There will be general shows of emotion because, yes, we're not stone cold.
We are very, emotional, vibrant people.
Yes, There may be a praise dance, which was beautiful. But no, ain't nobody about to be trying to hop in the casket. Ain't nobody about to be necessarily breaking out in fights. Like, that's not the way.
Jumps up on stage if they're not on the program. Like, that's not going to happen.
That is not the norm, people. That's not. Back to your Chet Hanks cameo as Curtis. Perfect casting.
Chef's kiss, because he is a hot mess, as we all know, but when I say I was not expecting him and what he did in that episode, everything.
One of the best gems of this season is this cameo. And then him saying he's got such a thick accent that he's from Tribeca.
Yes.
Still cannot believe that's Tom Hanks' son. I just want to be able to fly on the wall for dinner with the two of them. Just a fly on the wall.
Tom Hanks get battle with those fans over Rita?
Tom was about to lay some hands on somebody. He said, back the fuck up off me and my wife. Okay? Appreciate that. Y'all think that people be out here just so docile. Don't come for people's loved ones. You about to push that woman down?
Exactly.
Y'all doing too much. I caught the Paperboy Homecoming tour flyers up on the wall, by the way, my second watch. I don't know if there were Easter eggs in all of the standalone episodes that kind of tie back into the cast, but I caught it this one.
Once in a while, there was like a news, something on a radio or a newscaster that's like very subtle that I would notice here and there. But yeah.
A couple more questions for you for this episode before we move into episode 8. One of the nagging thoughts I had was, were these people ever around their child usually? Because it seemed like Sebastian reference Sylvia so much that it made me wonder, do y'all ever parent him? Sylvia rubs his back and sings him songs at bedtime. She takes him to his class every day. Like, when are y'all home? When do y'all spend time with this child? And so for that reason, I wondered as a parent, what you thought about how they handled the discussion about Sylvia's death.
Yeah, that was an interesting thing because I think every situation is individual for sure, but because she was so woven into his world, his lifestyle, yeah, I don't know if I would have said that she died, but definitely I would have said something along the lines of like, she's no longer with us, in terms of she's not going to be able to come. She would want to, but she's unable to do it. Like, I would have definitely had to do it that way because, kids are very smart, and I don't doubt their intelligence, but I do think it's important to be aware on how they handle it, because, like, for example, with my child, there'll be a lot of whys, a lot of why, and it just really depends on if you have the energy to answer those questions.
What message did you take from the insistent package delivery to their apartment that turned out to be a picture of Sylvia and Sebastian from family picture day at school?
Why is this so creepy? Like, there were moments in these episodes where I'm just like, why? Again, giving me major Twilight Zone vibes. Like, why is it so still and quiet and creepy? Because this episode didn't have to be that creepy. Like, it was about,
it's almost like she was haunting them from the grave.
Yes.
Because even the face she was making in the last picture when he pulled it out, it was like this look of, I don't think it was condemnation, but almost like, I was that child's mama. You know what I mean? Like
I'm judging you.
Yeah, like, look who was at the family picture day with your son because you weren't here. You know what I mean? So that's kind of what I took from it. But, who knows? It's the mind of Donald Glover and co. So let's move on to episode 8. The ones I'm not reading who it's written by the way, is because I don't see a written by. So I do want to give credit to those who I'm seeing named, and apologies to those if I'm missing any. So episode 8, New Jazz, was written by Donald Glover. New Jazz, again, throwaway episode for me. Felt like a detour. Darius and Al take a trip through the streets of Amsterdam off a hallucinogen. What does Darius do for money? Seriously. Came up a couple times. Al asked, do you want to split the check when they were at breakfast? Nah, I got it. Al had to pay for Darius's drugs. What does he do for money in the first place?
Yeah, I have no idea. Because I always assumed that he was the mooch, right?
I'm like, I didn't think he was on payroll. He doesn't have any job title like Earn does. So
yeah, but he's always there and he's always taken care of,
For a minute, I was like, maybe he's the hype man. Maybe he's, he was backstage dancing at the one performance, but he didn't go on stage.
That's true.
So what do you do? Is he like?
But I feel like every crew has this person, though. You know what I mean?
But I think a lot of times those people are on payroll for one reason or another. So I just need to know what Darius supposedly does. Because obviously he's giving advice. He's telling Al not to do certain things, and Al's listening, like backing your information up to the cloud.
Interesting.
But I have no idea what he does for money. And it just came up again in this episode. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know where you thought he was going to get anything from.
Like every classic Black comedy show, you have that one friend who ain't got no job.
Tommy. But we know Tommy had to have a job because him and Pam lived together at one point. And I know she wasn't footing that bill alone.
And he was always clean. So
there you go. R.I.P. R.I.P. Tommy. The 3 psycho teenagers who follow Al wanting an autograph and stole a random woman's baby and threw it. Was that supposed to be real or imagined? Because that was absolutely terrifying to witness.
Ashley, this is not my favorite episode. And it was a bit of a fever dream because it was like, what am I watching? I have no idea.
That's why for me, it was a throwaway episode, because I'm like, what am I supposed to be getting from this? And what does this have to do with the trajectory that we've been on, right? But Al and Darius get split up. And Al meets a very insulting yet persistent new friend, Lorraine, who gives him a bit of an education on the music business, i.e. Masters ownership, and took him through a red light district adventure. Let's talk about the Liam Neeson cameo at Cancel Club. This was the moment that I was like, is this a mockery that I mentioned earlier? Because they had him on here discussing the controversy that he had when he had the audacity to mention wanting to assault a random Black man after a friend of his was raped. So my question that I wrote down was Atlanta trying to make light and rehab this man's image for the show?
Yeah, that's a great question because, I'm also surprised he agreed to it, right? Like, you would think his publicist would have been like, let's not bring this up ever again. Because at this point, I kind of forgot about it. Mind you, after that happened, a lot of the movies that followed didn't do as well, right? Not as well as Taken, of course, but this was a fever dream of an episode, Ashley. So it is really hard to pinpoint some of the message outside of it just really being a trip. Trip.
Yeah, absolutely. I just didn't know what to make of that. I didn't know what to make of the episode as a whole, but I especially didn't know what to make of that because I definitely don't fuck with Liam Neeson anymore. So,
oh, really?
No.
Liam Neeson's? Oh, you remember the whole skit, Key and Peele?
No, I loved Vanessa though, his wife who passed away. Parent Trap, her magic from that movie still gives me the feels every time I watch.
Absolutely. I think about her every time I think about Emma Thompson, for sure.
Yeah, but I don't fuck with Liam Neeson. So that's all I got for the episode. Let's move on to episode 9. Rich Wigga, Poor Wigga, written by Donald Glover. Shot in black and white and centered on Aaron, a clearly confused biracial teenager, passing as white at school and in life. This guy was using racial slurs and stereotypes against Black people while playing video games, yet riding to school next to his Black father. But karma, he didn't have the financial resources to get into college, and an opportunity at school for a free ride is presented by a Black alumni, the heir to the pink oil moisturizer fortune. But guess what? That opportunity was only for Black students. They even made students interview to test their Blackness. For that check, Aaron Avi did not make the cut and resolves to burn down the school, which also did not work out for him. By the episode's end, he's chosen to lean into his Blackness. But did he really choose, or was he forced?
I don't know if I like the term force, because I think what we see in this episode is the lack of benefits of distancing himself from Blackness. like it's something that I saw growing up in school, especially with biracial people. They never wanted anything to do with Blackness until it came time to apply to college scholarships. And that was always disheartening, because it's like, well, what's wrong with being Black, right? And I do understand and respect being biracial, but it was just always looked down, or it was always inferred in some ways that, I'm not Black.
The reason why I chose no. Yo, that was great. The reason why I use the word forced too is because I've considered, was he forced out of sheer circumstance? Because he had done so much that did not go his way. Did life essentially push him in the direction to need to embrace his Blackness? Because obviously what he was doing before was not working out, and my guy had a whole, PO by the end of the episode.
Ooh, that last
and basically working at Best Buy.
It was the buzz cut and the double piercing and the brushing for me. I was like, what are we doing here? Oh my god.
And the chain. It was the whole look. Like, my guy was supposedly working at Best Buy, fitted, hitting on chicks, talking about that ass is stupid. What? Who are you, Aaron?
But it was, again, the first time we meet him, not a shred of Black culture anywhere found in his room. He felt very comfortable using the N-word, of course, when he was playing those video games.
With that hard ER. Yes, he did.
But anything else, it was like, oh no, until it's to his benefit. But of course, you know, unfortunately, it's human nature. You just go through life figuring out how to make it less difficult, I guess, in a very selfish individual kind of way.
I found this situation fascinating too, because in my mind, usually people who are in this position of potentially leaning into whiteness over blackness do not necessarily come from households in which there is a prominent black parent. And so in this case, the fact that he was I said in my mind.
Oh,
I said in my mind.
This happened 9 times out of 10 when there is a black father, whereas
that's why I said mama. In my mind, because I don't have any real life example to pull from and be like, oh, well, in this scenario, I knew that this happened, even though this person was raised by their black father or what have you. Because look at like a Meghan Markle. Meghan,
her mom is black. Definitely, the mother is black.
I understand. Could definitely be white passing, but leans into her blackness. And I say that too because he was
though. I love her to death, but she doesn't.
I say leans into her blackness in terms of she embraces parts of the culture prominently and proudly.
Yes.
When she had the wedding was the blackest royal wedding that there has ever been.
Absolutely.
That's what I mean. Obviously, she still married a white man and what have you.
No, that has nothing to do with her partner. It has everything to do with what she was before. She was very adamant on talking about being biracial, and it was like in certain conversations or interviews, she talked about her mom being black and her dad being white, but she never liked choosing. And her whole upbringing was California, Valley girl, prep school, whiteness, you know what I mean? And that's why as a black person, you know, you root for her because she's American and you fall for the, you know, Cinderella fairy tale of it all. And you saw the racism that she was getting both for being an American and having a black mother. You want to make sure she's safe, but she was very much like, oh, I'm mixed. You know, all her friends are white and very affluent white people because her friend set her up on a blind date with Prince. So,
well, I guess I can only speak. I guess I can only speak to the Meghan Markle post Harry relationship. I can't speak to previously because post, I thought it seems like she's tried to embrace certain aspects of the culture. But again, what I was saying was it's not even like Aaron came from a household of a white mom and a black dad. It was, from what I saw, just a black dad. So I was like, it's interesting that still didn't influence you in the ways that I would have thought.
That happens all the time.
Again,
Herschel That's a prime example.
But Herschel Walker is I don't want to be cruel, but Herschel Walker does not have all the eggs in the basket as a human being. He is a black man. He's not even out here looking like he could pass. That's a black man.
No, but his son Christian is not out here embracing the culture. That is what I'm trying to say.
Gotcha. I can see but in that case, like father, like son, like that influence obviously is not the same as it seemed like it would have been in this show where the daddy's telling you, like, you get pulled over by the cops, listen, this is going to happen. Oh, I don't think I'll have that problem. So that's what I'm saying. That's why it seems interesting. But I just I know I don't have enough real life examples to go off of because I don't really have any friends or people that I'm close with who are in this position. So I'm just speaking on what I would have expected, what my thoughts were that I would have expected. But that
actor was very good. And are you going to bring up the fact that Kevin Samuels?
I was going to say it was strange seeing him in this episode so soon after his passing. I hadn't known he was going to be in this episode, but I thought he did a good job though.
I thought so too, but it was definitely an interesting moment when he appeared. I thought he did well for what he was supposed to do, but it was actually quite sad to know that, you know, you can be here one day and not the next, you know?
Oh, absolutely. And it just seems it was spooky because literally he had just passed away and this episode came out. So
Yeah.
let's move on to our finale, episode 10. I don't know how to pronounce this, Terrar. This
Yeah.
one was written by Stefani Robinson, focused on Van's European identity crisis. This ish comes to a head. A friend from back home was visiting Paris to get paid 6K for peeing on a man and runs into Van, who now has a French accent and blunt bangs, an ode to the film Amelie, apparently. She goes on some strange adventures, including nearly beating a man to death with a hard ass baguette and setting Alexander Skarsgård up with drugs. Would you have gotten naked with Alexander Skarsgård if he had asked back in your single days?
Girl, True Blood was my show. Okay. But in this particular episode, it was giving major creep vibes. So no, no. Especially with him dancing to Ashanti as if that's like the best song ever. I'm like,
hilarious.
I'm questioning your judgment already.
Hilarious song choice, as was his choice of underwear. Yes. Serving people fried human hands was the straw for me in this episode. I was like, I don't want to play anymore. I don't know what's happening, but I'm over it. And Van has a complete breakdown at the mention of her daughter, Lottie. What did you think about Van's journey this season, this focus on her for the last episode, and what her breakdown really means?
So to speak to her character in the show, I literally was like, WTF the majority of the show, because I'm just like, to your point earlier, she wore this character so well that I was second guessing myself. Like, has some significant amount of time passed? She out there
right,
with a reputation and a boyfriend.
She was in a whole spread in a magazine.
I mean, mingling with celebrities. And so I'm just like, and mind you, celebrities are people too, but you understand what I'm trying to mean. Like, she has a whole rapport with freaking Alexander, you know? So whatever she was going through, it was obviously hella deep because she was completely transformed, and to see her wake up out of it, one, congratulations to Zazie. She really did a great job in her performance. Like, this was giving me major Emmy bait, by the way. And in terms of the whole arc of her character, at this rate, I really don't know what it means, because we really don't know what the real solution is. I need for her to get home to her baby at this point. Like, she doesn't need a relationship with Ern. I just need for her to just get out of Europe and pick up the pieces in Atlanta. That was a lot of irony in this whole season, for the most part, with the main crew not even being in Atlanta. They brought Atlanta to Europe, though.
I think Van is depressed, ultimately, especially when I looked back and thought about the fact that she was talking about she was having panic attacks. She had a minute of kind of suicidal ideation in the car. And I definitely hope that, based off of this kind of mental break that she had this season and the journey she went on, that when she does go back to Atlanta next season, she's able to get some form of help. Like, I don't know if the plan was to focus on, to make it really a focus for mental health and the issues within the Black community in those ways, and the idea of really seeking mental health help. But I hope we get to see that journey for Van, because I talked to one of my friends who's an avid Atlanta watcher, and he laughed through this episode. And I was like, I didn't find a single thing funny. I was so deeply disturbed watching this episode with Van. It creeped me out. It saddened me. I almost cried watching her have that mental break in the kitchen. Like, it was as if I was watching one of my friends just like spaz out. And I'm like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. I don't know how to help you. And it probably doesn't help that it's Zazie, and I love Zazie. I was really freaked out a little bit. So I just need to see her return to a better state, and to definitely get back to Atlanta, get back to home and figure this out. I don't think it's just about her career, because I thought that's what it was at first. And she was like, oh, I didn't get a certain job and I came here. It's definitely, to your point, I think deeper than that. I think it's she's going through a depression. Mm-hmm. And who knows if this is even the first time in her life, but this obviously was the time that it was significant. So
yeah, and I'm also reminded of the second episode of, like, you know, her obviously going through a depression, and even her showing up in Europe wanting a change of scenery. I think she was doing the right things that could help her, but I feel like she probably ended up going into dead ends. I mean, you know, again, following fate and following this number and address, and it takes you to some really intense situations with a cult-like group. You know, I'm sure there's a level of disappointment there, right? And so the next time we see her, she's just like, essentially, F it all, let me push people into the pool because I think it's funny.
and the fact that the one lady could not swim, it just takes me out every time.
Wait, it was the person at the very end who was dramatically jumping in the water to save the lady. I'm like, oh my goodness.
Because Ern was just sitting there. I'm like, Ern, that lady cannot swim. Like, she's about to drown. I want the best for our cast. I think after being with them for so long and going through these seasons, you definitely want the best for the cast. But I don't think I had felt this close to Van in previous seasons as I did in this season. You know what I mean?
I don't think she had this much screen time. And even if we go as far back as, you know, her trying to go to that Drake party and trying
her
to
girls
get something out of there, but obviously Drake never shows up, which is, you know, something that's common. But yeah, very, very interesting to see the arc of her character.
Yeah, wishing her the best. Overall, final thoughts on Atlanta season 3. What you got?
Overall, it was a lot of fun. Literally, each episode was something new, something unexpected. I just think it was interesting that the themes all seem to be around, you know, either Black people getting their check, so to speak, whether literally or figuratively, and the direct white response or reaction to that, right? I'm thinking about the rich wigga, poor wigga episode when the white students were complaining about the Black students wanting, or, you know, having this opportunity, and they were like, yeah, I know a guy who got accepted to all of his schools and full scholarship, and essentially he's a ball player or whatever. So they're using that as an example of like, oh, Black people secretly get into things anyway because they're Black. And we're like, and I'm like, is that what y'all think?
Probably.
Oh my gosh. And there was a lot of things around scammers to different levels. Like I talked about that couple, but then I think about the young artist at the billionaire's house.
TJ.
Like that. Yeah. And but yeah, it was a lot of fun, a lot of unnecessary spooky stuff in my opinion, because I'm just like, what is happening here? Like I said, a season full of Teddy Perkins.
The creepiest episode, one of the creepiest episodes of television I've ever seen. My final thoughts, this season could have been 8 episodes. I really do think there was a couple in there that were unnecessary, that did not really move the storylines or move the season along.
I agree.
And I do think that there was some really great commentary to be had from this season, some really great observations, some really great opportunities. And I'm curious now to see how they're possibly going to end this. You know, we know season 4, next season, is the very last for Atlanta. So what are these folks going to give us? I'm still intrigued. I'm still curious. And I want to see how these folks' journeys end in the Atlanta universe. So Brandon, that was for you, babe. You're welcome.
That's for you, Brandon.
Thank you guys so much for listening. We appreciate it. Give us your thoughts on Atlanta season 3. Delora, it is now time for Hidden Gems. What you got this week?
Yes, Ashley, I have 2 this week. My first, The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. If you know me, you know that I rejected this entire, universe of shows for a very long time because I was, of the opinion that it doesn't help womankind as a whole. Okay. But then I got into The Real Housewives of Potomac when I was moving one time. And I chose Potomac over Atlanta simply because I think at that point there were only like 2 seasons. And with Atlanta, there were so many seasons to catch up on. I just decided not to do it. So I decided to catch up on Potomac, which I've talked about previously. And I was like, I think I have the capacity to add another Real Housewives to my repertoire. And I have The Wealthy Ladies of Beverly Hills. Now, I want to highlight that I am only watching season 11 and season 12, just because I had to watch and get the tea on Erica Jane and the debacle of her husband, Girardi. So, and then of course, Garcelle Beauvais is in it too. I have to see what was up with her. So I got hooked via Hulu and I finished all of season 11 and now I am on season 12. And I need somebody to talk to because I don't know how I feel about Sutton. I thought my thoughts on her were clear, but with her teaming up with Garcelle, I'm just like, well, is she not that bad? But then when it comes to freaking Crystal, I was rooting for her last season because she was new. And this season, she looks like a mess. So I need to figure things out. Currently obsessed with it. Kyle Richards and her relationship with Kathy Hilton is very unique. And Kathy Hilton is giving me wacky wealthy woman. You know what I mean? Because she does very odd things because guess what? She can. So not much hidden, but definitely something I'm really enjoying these days. My second hidden gem is a book. I am very proud of myself. I love reading. I have a lot of books. I've been guilty of going to the bookstores because that's one of my favorite things to do, buying books and watching them stack up on the shelf sometimes. But, Ashley knows this, my work schedule is insane. And I'm very proud of myself that I finally picked up one of the books that I've purchased recently. And this one is called By the Book by Jasmine Guillory. I talked about this in a previous episode because I was in the middle of the book, but I finally finished it. It was super cute. Not everything's predictable and not everything about this book is cool. There are definitely corny elements. It's a book centering a beautiful Black woman named Izzy. And, it's a take on the Beauty and the Beast storyline. So the guy, Bo, is very grumpy and she's the bright light, and you see how they come together. So I want to say this really quick. So I finished the book. Again, things happened that I didn't expect, but there were moments where I was like, okay, this is super corny, but it was what I needed to get my mind off of the real world. And so I was like, oh, I'm ready to pick up another book. I picked up another romance book, and it's a traditional one. And I say that saying it centers, a white woman. She's in Spain, and it's a very sexy Latin lover, not Latin lover, but Spanish lover element. And I realized very quickly why this book mattered. The Jasmine Guillory's book matter is because I'm like, you don't always get a chance to read stories, love stories like these that center Black women that's, super popular. I'm not talking about Zayn, because these are kind of sexy, but they're not that sexy. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, thank you, Jasmine, for being very mindful of centering Black women, and Black women of all sizes and shapes and ages, and who enjoys food, which I also love. Food is a very important element in her stories, because it warmed my heart to be like, yeah, I could identify with Izzy. She had knotless twists or knotless braids that she had to put up in a top knot to learn how to surf. You know what I mean? I'm like, that's a Black girl thing. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Certain things that I took for granted that I really missed when I went into my next, easy romance novel read. And I just want to say thank you. And that's why things like Bridgerton also matter too, because a lot of those Bridgerton books, were nowhere to be seen, but at least we can have it visually. So that's all I got. What about you, Ashley?
All right. I have 3. Well, speaking of books real quick, you just reminded me, I think Sunny Halston's second in the Summer of the Bluff series should be coming out soon.
Yes!
So definitely got to pick that up once it's available. So anyway, I have 3 hidden gems this week. My first one is Father of the Bride on HBO Max. I was so looking forward to this dropping because I love Father of the Bride original with Steve Martin, Diane Keaton.
Yes.
Same. And this one, I knew it wasn't going to live up to the original just because the original is a comedy. Steve Martin is a comedian, Avi, and I figured this one was going to be a little different because it's Andy Garcia, it's Gloria Estefan, but I still really enjoyed it. It was, still very family centric and apparently attracted the largest audience of any HBO Max movie that has streamed exclusively on the platform. So congratulations to that cast.
Wow.
On that accomplishment. I definitely encourage everybody to check it out because again, it was still very, very lovely story. Dad not wanting his daughter to, tie the knot and all those things, still those same elements, but a few surprises along the way. So Father of the Bride, HBO Max. My second, this was such a delight for me, guys. The Summer I Turned Pretty, Amazon series. I could not believe it when I saw this on Amazon Prime. I did not know it was coming, but this is a Jenny Han book series adaptation, and I loved this book series.
You read the book?
Oh, absolutely. Loved this book series. So when I saw it, I was like, what? Got so excited. I had not known that, Jenny had been trying to develop this apparently for the last 10 years. And I was excited to dive back into this world. I was testing my memory throughout this first season to see what all I still remember from the books, what had changed, whatnot. Team Jeremiah, by the way. But
don't they look the same? I don't know.
They're brothers.
Oh,
so, yes.
It's on my list because I love a moment like this. So okay.
But the show basically is a coming of age tale. It focuses on a girl who's caught in a love triangle between 2 brothers. And it's very beautifully shot because it's based in a beach atmosphere because her family and the 2 brothers' family always get together. Their moms are best friends, all of this. So first season is out. It's already going to have a second season. Hopefully there are 3 seasons because there are 3 books. Oh. And I read some things. I read some interviews with Jenny Han and how she wanted to update this for the current generation. Because again, this book has been out for a few years. So really wanting to update it, make it fresh, make it resonate with today's generation that will be consuming this. I loved it. I'm going to be rewatching the season. That's how much I loved it.
How do you feel about it being in a series as opposed to the movies that we've come to love from Netflix?
I prefer a series. I will always prefer a series because I prefer long form storytelling for the most part. Mm-hmm. It's rare that I'll watch something and be like, oh, this would have been better as a movie because I want to see all those elements, especially if it was a book. I want it to have the life that it deserves. Yeah. Think about how much better The Hunger Games would have been if it had been able to be a series adaptation. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? So it's rare that I'll think that something did not deserve to be made into at least a 1 season. But again, there's 3 books. So first season, so well done on Amazon Prime. Guys, check that out. My last one, The Lake. This one I was not looking for, came to me on Amazon after I finished The Summer I Turned Pretty. So freaking delightful. That's literally what I have in my notes. Delightful, funny, interesting. This centers on Justin, who returns from living abroad in the hope of reconnecting with his biological daughter, who he gave up for adoption. And it kind of goes awry because he's feuding with his stepsister over a family cottage at the lake. And his stepsister is played by the one and only Julia Stiles, who somehow managed to look back exactly how she did in 10 Things I Hate About You. I don't know how, but I really enjoyed the series. It's probably another one that I'm going to rewatch this season again, just because that's how much I enjoyed it. So The Lake, Amazon, check it out. And those are my 3 hidden gems for this week, guys. Thank you so much. You know, if you ever have any thoughts, recommendations, you want us to recap something, do not hesitate to reach out and let us know. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, so Ashley, really quick, I just want to read one of our comments before we go.
Yes.
This is the latest one that we have. We got it from Angry Joe's Friend. I appreciate this alias so much. It's from June 8th, 2022. Great chemistry. I love how Delora and Ashley have different personalities, but the podcast never feels disjointed. They play off each other's energy very well, and it keeps me listening. Keep up the great work. Thank you so much, Angry Joe's Friend, for leaving a comment. I've posted it on our social media. Please be sure to follow us on our Instagram and check out our stories. But we appreciate all your comments, you guys. Thank you.
And please keep them coming. And guys, we are going to be taking a couple of weeks away because, again, we're going to Essence Fest, and Delora has to celebrate her B-Day out here in these streets.
It's also around the holiday, so it's not solely, about me.
But we may do some posts of some old shows for you guys to enjoy and kind of get a taste for, and continue to give you something in our absence. We'll see, but just know we'll be back with some new fresh episodes in a couple of weeks, and we will see you then.
Bye.